All right, let's watch NBC News go from optimistic to disappointed about the election night, and notice how much bias there is in their coverage.
You and I have been talking for months about the disconnect for some voters between the actual numbers in the economy, inflation, the lowest it's been in several years, the unemployment rate at just over 4%, and yet people don't necessarily feel great about it.
Yeah, these top-line economic numbers that are so strong and robust for the American economy, but when you ask voters how they consistently feel like higher prices is something that's holding their family back. And it's not just inflation. You know, I've been going to
So this is a perfect example of what I mean about the bias. It's a little less obvious at NBC than MSNBC. MSNBC, very unhinged. But this attitude towards people complaining about the economy, actually, the top line economic numbers are good. Ridiculous.
What that means for tonight, who knows? There are all these other factors. I will say one thing, Hallie, and you and I have talked about this a lot. Voters say they feel lousy about the economy, but they keep spending. Voters say they feel lousy about the economy, but they're
planning vacations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So they do have household finances in general are better today than many thought they would be 4 years after the pandemic.
Also, who are you to say that, though, based on your expert financial analysis, that people are just lying about this? What are you basing this on, the top line economic numbers? Are you considering that the stock market? Maybe the stock market's doing well. Sure, wealthy people are doing great. What about the average American?
Not so good to poor. Look at that number, 67% there. That's a big number. That's the biggest number we've seen in terms of poor and not so good in the last 3 or 4 cycles here. Only 5% say excellent, which is pretty interesting. Only 28% say good when there are all of these top-line economic numbers that have been so consistently strong. But this is exactly what we've been hearing from people for so long. They just feel like the economy is not working for them, guys.
So, Christine,
But look, she obviously does not believe them. It's incredible. Like, I wonder what her actual opinions are without a media filter.
Peter, talk to me about how the Harris campaign is feeling. I know you've been reporting all day about sort of their momentum and sort of maybe a changing of mood. They were feeling a bit more positive today.
Yeah, not just positive today. They've been feeling increasingly confident over the course of the last several days. Let's look at that favorability number, though, for a moment. And Kamala Harris, she performs better than both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 4 points ahead of Donald Trump, 7 points ahead of Joe Biden.
NBC, as you'll see here, references this exit poll multiple times, which basically has state of democracy as the #1 issue.
If this is how voters were thinking about this election, if this is the makeup, it's certainly something you'd rather be the Team Harris. This is what they would want to see versus what Team Trump. Look, I do think what this exit poll is saying, and what I really believe this is a macro election. This is an election about who we are. This is not about the economy and inflation. Certainly, they've been the mood music of the conversation, but the voters
They've been the conversation because they're what matters.
What this is telling me is they went in there with a much bigger concern about the direction of the country.
Only 30% say it's about the same today. 24% say better. 45% say it's worse today in terms of their family finances. So we know there's been this negative mood music, Chuck, for months now about inflation, about the overall feeling of the economy, even as all the top line numbers, Hallie and Tom, have remained really strong.
Christine, but before
It was incredible during the first 2 hours of this broadcast how many times they said, no, the economy is actually great. And whatever, the economy isn't even the #1 issue. #1 issue is democracy.
Former President Trump last night got the endorsement of the nation's most popular podcaster, Joe Rogan. That is likely to maybe help him with men, especially young men. He's hugely influential. Not likely to help him with women. He did bring out conservative commentator Megyn Kelly, who was actually pretty critical of his approach with women, but she tried to help him make that closing pitch to female voters. But he's really, Hallie, been leaning into talking points that are more catering to men and platforms that cater more to men.
To the turnout among young voters, they're pointing to that. Take, for example, they say what's happening in Pennsylvania is a good indication of heavy turnout in their favor, particularly at schools like Lafayette and Lehigh. At the campus of Lehigh University, they note at times today the line was up to 7 hours long. The campaign saying it's sending additional support. That support coming in the form of some celebrity assistance. Some of the stars of the Avengers film series, Don Cheadle, Paul Rudd, Mark Ruffalo, campaign sources tell me will be arriving there to help keep those individuals energized, to keep them in line. We're also told that state election officials are...
So that's so funny. It's a little bit cringe that they did that. Another thing, Trump's celebrity endorsements, I think, were way more powerful. Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, people like that who can also talk politics as opposed to just some random actor who was in a Marvel movie saying, hey, vote Kamala.
We come to this other county, Clayton County. Again, these are the suburbs of Atlanta, those ring counties around Atlanta. 84% for Biden, 85% for her, so she's holding that high watermark. We move over to Rockdale.
So here's a great example of the not immediately obvious bias that was occurring that night at NBC. They're cherry-picking counties, it looks like, just to make the race seem much closer. They essentially show this cherry-picking later in the video, and I'll show you that.
Look at this, 69% for Biden, 75% tonight for Harris. They're looking at these numbers tonight, and again, there's still a lot of vote out, but they're looking at these numbers tonight, and they're telling themselves this is the kind of rhythm they want for the rest of Georgia throughout the night. Only 25% of the vote is in. Trump is way on top. But
way up, so he's clearly just picking the ones where Kamala's doing a little better.
12,000 votes, a little under that. Let's start in Atlanta, the metro region. Cobb County, we have 57% of the vote in. And let's see how Biden did, 56%. This is actually, Cobb County tells the story of the Atlanta metro region. Newt Gingrich represented Cobb County. And look how Democrats have been able to run up the score. From Romney in 2012, Clinton flips it, and look how they're growing the margins. And tonight, that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. She's growing the margins in Cobb County. Let's go around. Let's see what we have in Fulton. Fulton, 53%. Let's see how that compares to Biden, 72%. She's holding her own around the Atlanta metro region. Let's see over here. Gwinnett, we only have about 1% in. Not really worth a discussion there. Clayton County, 70% in. Slightly overperforming Biden. That's pretty good. We'll keep...
That's pretty good.
Moving. Henry County, 1% in. This is one of those swing counties we can talk about. You know, 1% in. I don't know how much we're going to be able to say there. Rockdale County, again, those Atlanta suburbs, 77% of the vote in. She's overperforming there. Okay, that's Harris. That's the Democrats. Let's go to these rural regions. Rabun, 95% in. Trump at 78 in 2020. He's at 78 right now. You can see he's holding his marks. Union County, a little bit lower, but again, he's around the 80% mark where he should be, and overperforming in White County. Again, those are the rural counties. Let's go to Georgia's Black Belt, where they have counties with lots of African-American voters. Here in Doherty, this is about 70% African-American here, slightly overperforming Biden. So again, guys, what I'm trying to say here is that right now, it's very similar to what we saw in 2020. Trump seems to be hitting his marks where he was in the rural counties. In those African-American counties and around the Atlanta region, Democrats are hitting those marks. It's going to be very close. It's one of the reasons why when we click on Georgia right here, it is literally just too close to call, guys.
All right.
Sure, it's too close to call because it's a swing state. In that graphic, he's still up by over 10 points. He's clearly cherry-picking. Kamala did not flip one county from red to blue in the entire election. That hasn't happened, I believe, since 1938. Those are not organic points on the map that he's doing. He literally admits that essentially later in the video. This, I think, is just done for the illusion of the person watching to be like, oh, it's a close race. You had to really look hard to find areas where Kamala was overperforming even a little bit.
She's on top by 71%. Let's see how she did compared to Biden 4 years ago. 66%. So she's overperforming in Cuyahoga, and there's still a lot of that vote that's out. Let's go down to Franklin County. It holds the capital of Ohio, Columbus, 68%. Overperforming there with about 60% of the vote that's in. And then again, 266,000 remaining. So just those two counties, we're talking about more than 500,000 votes.
So look, they're just like choosing random counties in Ohio. You really, as I said, had to cherry pick counties from across the entire country. That clip of Jake Tapper saying, not one county, Kamala's overperforming Biden by 3%. I don't know why you're doing this other than just to give the watcher the illusion that it's a close race. You choose a few Kamala, you choose a few Trump. Why don't you just be honest and say, hey, it looks very good for Trump right now? I'm not sure why they don't just do that if they're NBC News. Let MSNBC be a little bit more unhinged.
As soon as we can make a call, again, too early, you know we're going to project it, guys.
Tom, you had a little something for everybody in that, no matter who you're rooting for. We got a couple of results to read.
A little something for everybody. Shouldn't you just be trying to cover it accurately, though?
An increasingly optimistic atmosphere both here at West Palm Beach and at Mar-a-Lago, where Trump and his closest allies, friends, and family are watching the results come in. Savannah.
All right, thank you.
So this is where it started to become a little bit more obvious that Trump was probably going to win.
Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of people on the Democratic side that are paying a lot of attention to what's happening with Sherrod Brown and John Tester right now.
How about that? Yeah.
Because the fact that it's been called for Trump in Montana and it hasn't been called for the Senate race gives you an indication. Same thing in Ohio. And I think everybody needs to remember what Lester just said is true. It's a 50-50 country. Let's assume for purposes of this conversation that, in fact, they take the Senate. And let's assume for purposes that Trump wins the presidency. They're not going to have more than 51 votes in the Senate, maybe 52.
53.
And you have a couple of Republicans that are not all on board with some of the Trump stuff, like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski.
Pretty hilarious pivot that happened incredibly quickly from, I hope Kamala wins, to, I hope we don't lose the Senate by that many seats.
Shapiro's not going anywhere. You may see him on a ballot in the future.
Yeah, I'm just going to call it out. You sound like you see the end here.
I don't. I do think that, obviously we're disappointed about North Carolina and Georgia because there was a...
See, again, it sounds here like they just want to keep the show rolling and keep people with some suspense about the results, even though at this point in the night, the betting markets, the odds of Trump winning were very high.
Real feeling that there was such a good ground game compared to what the Trump
And to be
team
clear,
was
we
doing.
haven't called those.
No, we haven't. But I'm looking internally at the numbers,
Sure.
and they're not as hopeful as I would like them to be. I still think we have a path, obviously, in the blue wall
I mean, she's just being realistic, and they don't seem to want that for their TV show.
states. And I don't think anybody knows how Nevada is going to turn out. And I think that is another one. We could have 4 states that determine the presidency that are all decided by less than a half a point.
Okay. Thanks for that.
That's so 2024, Senator.
How's that?
Let's go to NBC News correspondent Allison Barber now in Gwinnett County.
Based on the percent of early votes that are out, Harris is leading in the early votes that they have tabulated in this county so far, but still they haven't counted any of the precincts that reported today.
Look, again, why? This is why basically nobody trusts the mainstream media. Why not just be honest and say Harris is probably going to lose Georgia? She needs a miracle at this point to win. Look at the right side of the screen. You don't need to be a data analyst. 86% in, Trump is up by 3.2%. That would have to be like a total clean sweep from Harris to probably have a chance to win.
Saying that Trump has an insurmountable lead. I believe you and Chuck have said there's still some vote out there. It's not over yet. What do you see?
I'm going to give you point counterpoint. First off, let's see.
So here's where you can see it's not really proof, but it looks like they're clearly just cherry picking for Kamala to make it look close.
Where that remaining vote is so far. Again, the giant bubbles, that's where the vote still needs to be counted. It's all over the Atlanta metro region. This is where Democrats are going to run up the score. This is where their base is, where they've been able to expand. So I'm going to click on a county here like Cobb County. I'm going to bring it out to compare to Joe Biden in 2020. Remember, she wants to perform over or at where Biden is right now to kind of see where her watermarks are. I'm going to highlight this so you guys can see the numbers to follow. Remember, on the left-hand side, she wants to be at where he is or higher. So let's see where we're at here. Fulton County, 71-72, slightly under. We move over to Gwinnett, a little bit under, 73. She's overperforming in Rockdale County. We'll come to DeKalb here, a little bit under. We come over to Douglas County. She's overperforming. But here's the flip side of all this. Let's throw a dart to the east side of Georgia. Any county, I'm going to pick a random.
See, like now he's throwing darts. Before, he's just looking at the map. Maybe we can find some places Kamala's doing good in Ohio. Maybe some in Pennsylvania. I don't know.
Random county. Look how Trump's overperforming. 68% to 71. Again, I'm going to just touch random counties here. 65, 69. These aren't big counties, but any county I touch, he's going, except for that one, any other county. Well, actually, no, he flipped it. Actually, this any county you come here in rural Georgia, he's flipping all these counties. And like Jen Psaki just said, it's math. Can they run up the score here? Is this what the Secretary of State is talking about, that the numbers are so high in the rural counties?
That, by the way, was the entire map of the United States. If you just pick stuff, overwhelming majority, Trump would be overperforming what he was back in 2020. So why don't they just do that the entire election? Why do they got to make it 50-50 when the reality of the counties would be like 80-20, maybe even more skewed, 90-10 for Trump in terms of 2020 overperformance relative to the Trump-Biden race? I mean, I know the reason. I'm assuming it's just because you want your viewers to continue to watch your show, but I don't think that's very honest at all.
I also think Hallie had the opportunity to interview Vice President Kamala Harris, and you asked her a fascinating question. Do you think the country is ready for a black woman president? And she said yes. And depending on how this night goes, I think that will be one of the questions that gets asked as well.
This is the piece that, and again, we don't know what the outcome is yet. But I think when Hillary Clinton lost, a lot of people felt like, a lot of women, a lot of Democrats felt like there's never going to be a woman in my lifetime, right? And I think one of the things that is going to be a challenge if Harris loses is that there will be Democrats who will not want to take a risk on a woman, on someone who's diverse, because they'll think, I like that person, but the country's not ready. Here's
Barack Obama won twice.
the thing. The country's not ready until the country is ready with Barack Obama. There's a range of factors that lead to the win or loss of anyone, and we don't know what's happened yet, that will all have to be delved into, but I do worry about that if she loses.
We do know it is something that she leaned out of in her campaign, unlike Hillary Clinton in 2016. It was not something that she didn't open her stump speeches with that idea. I mean, she talks about it, and she talked about it with me. She's talked about it with all of you here, too, that it would be the president for all Americans, and that she is sort of putting her head down and grinding it out.
But if she loses, it won't be because women didn't turn out. It won't be because of women, right? It won't be because...
Kamala only won women by 7 points. Biden won women by 12. And by the way, since you're bringing up all this stuff, race and gender, your demographic, white women, voted for Trump. Trump won 53% of white women. So what do you mean it won't be because of women? And by the way, this Jen Psaki generally, I think, is on MSNBC. Notice this is pretty much the first unhinged take of the night. I think she just dropped into NBC for a little bit.
She pulled back a lot of the Democratic base that had gone away and were, double haters, as we called them for a long time, before there was a switch at the top of the ticket. And that is actually how Barack Obama also ran and won, which he didn't lead with the historic nature of his candidacy on his sleeve. There will be a lot of people who second guess that if she loses.
But if she loses, it may also be because there are tremendous headwinds in terms of an unpopular incumbent and people feeling terrible about the economy. And even if inflation is down to 2%, sometimes the stuff you feel, your gas price.
You just feel the bad economy. It's not actually a bad economy. And this inflation thing, I don't think it's too much to ask for every major reporter or whatever that works at one of these big networks to understand inflation. If inflation is down at 2%, but for the past 2.5 years, whatever it's been incredibly high, the inflation is still a massive problem. Trump's term, inflation was around 6 or 7% cumulatively. Biden's was around 20%. It doesn't just go away. You would need periods, at least like 2 years basically, of deflation for it to go back to the baseline of around a 2% inflation print. But for a bunch of reasons, central banks and governments don't want deflation. So if you have massive inflation, that's why it's such a problem. It takes years to fix that. Just because it comes down in like one quarter or a few quarters, it does not solve the problem. Again, that is not that difficult of a concept to understand. The analogy would just be like, if you gain 20 pounds of weight, then you only gain 2 pounds, you've still gained a bunch of weight. It's not that difficult to understand. I think these reporters should actually just sit down and study, figure out what inflation actually is and means.
Your groceries, it doesn't feel that way. So that may also be the rationale.
That's exactly my point. I was trying to make earlier, and you just did it in a more articulate way, which is that, there will be there are always leaps to conclusion in both parties when your candidate loses, or if they lose. And again, we don't know yet, but, and people will leap to different ones, right? The country isn't ready for a woman. The country isn't ready for a black woman, all of these things. But there are a lot of factors that play into the win or loss. And I think if she loses, I'm hopeful people will look at the broad scope of where the country is, the cultural divides, the rural-urban divides.
The education divides.
The education divides. There are just a lot of factors at play in presidential races.
By most accounts, he didn't perform well in his first debate with Harris.
True. And I also think that it throws into question a lot of things. I mean, I think anybody who watched that debate objectively felt she outperformed him in that debate. If she doesn't win, yes, there should have been a second debate, but do debates matter? They should matter. They're the public being able to see the candidates.
It's not 1970 anymore, though. You can go on the internet every single day, which Trump did way more effectively than Kamala. Kamala, I think, did fine in the debate. It was the time from the debate until the election when you can just go on massive shows like Joe Rogan and get nearly as many views as the debate did. Maybe even more, actually, with all the clipping.
She has a far superior ground operation that has been invested in across the country. The Republican state parties, you can...
By the way, how can you say that after you just lost or you're on track to losing? You can't really claim a better ground game when you just lost pretty decisively, by the way, in the election.
Disagree with me here, of course, are falling apart in many states in the country. That will throw into question, does that matter? It should matter, but it will throw that into question. So, yes, not a second debate, not an opportunity.
Why should that matter, though, the ground game? Going and knocking on doors, does that matter? Should that matter, as Jen Psaki's saying? I mean, policy should matter far more than a ground game. Final point of the night, listen to NBC News talk about the House of Representatives race, and I would say just a dishonest way.
Races there in the House. Ryan Nobles, we spent some time talking about Hakeem Jeffries probably paying very close attention to our count there in the House. Hakeem Jeffries would become the first black Speaker of the House.
Real pickups?
I would say right now, as it stands, there's just as much chance that Republicans win the House as there is that Democrats win the House. It's literally a 50-50 race right now. But to your point, Kate...
I don't know how you say that with a straight face. That is ridiculous. By the way, I'm going to show in a second. 1 hour before this, Trump said publicly, it looks like they're going to win the House because he was right. The odds of them winning the House at certain points during this night were like 98%, 90%, 80%. It was always incredibly high. I don't know where he's pulling that 50-50 number from. That is incredible. Watch even as Chuck Todd kind of refutes what he said here right now.
I'm with Ryan. Look, no matter what, the House is going to be single digits for either the Republicans or the Democrats. But, you know, you'd probably slightly rather be the Republicans right now, just slightly, given that they added a couple of pads, if you will, in Pennsylvania that just made it that much harder. Put it this way. Democrats probably have to take every one of their targets in California, and I don't think they will. And that's going to be
then it's not slightly. It's not 50-50. What is going on at NBC with this reporting? Why don't you just say it as it is?
It looks like we'll be keeping control of the House of Representatives.
So I'll finish the video here. Like I said, I think NBC had less unhinged takes in general than an MSNBC would, but I still think there was a ton of bias throughout the entire night. I don't know why they don't just try to play it more down the middle. We'll see what happens moving forward. With that said, thank you very much for watching this video. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment. I'll see you in the next one.